Yeah, Jamie, it was a great day. I think everyone was exhausted. The discussions had gone on really around the clock that week. There were two or three nights in a row where there was literally no break, and the previous 10 days there was very, very little break. And that was after discussions that had started on the previous September. So they ran from September 97 right through to Good Friday 98. So you can imagine the ups, the downs, the disappointments, the near things and the things that were knocking us off course. To finally get there was a great day for, I think, the public in Northern Ireland, because they were weary of so many decades, as your reporter said, of conflict, bombs, killings, shootings, mayhem. So to bring it to a conclusion, and thankfully the last 25 years has by and large been very peaceful. There has been some incidents, but thankfully fairly rare.
The Belfast Telegraph, I think, gave the peace talks a 5% chance of success. How did you get it to work in simple terms?
Well, I think probably, to take it simply, Tony Blair and I decided that we would go for inclusive talks, meaning that we would try to have everybody at the table, everybody that was willing to be at the table, including those parties that had previously been linked to those that were involved in paramilitary violence. That was a risk. But anyway, on the basis that they were stopping violence, or they were prepared to stop violence and sign up to the Mitchell principles, George Mitchell principles, which basically said you can't be involved in politics and involved in violence at the same time. And then on the other side, we went for comprehensive talks, which included all the big issues. The reform of policing, the changing of criminal justice legislation, the removing of a lot of the draconian legislation that was necessary during the troubled years, the release of prisoners on licence within the 2-year period, decommissioning of arms of paramilitaries, demilitarisation of Northern Ireland. So it was a huge agenda of items. And I think that the reason for that, Jamie, was that by trying to cover the items that were important to all the different groups, we could have went for a narrower agenda, but I don't think that would have worked. So it was inclusive by the people that were there, comprehensive by the issues that were on the table.
For an international audience, perhaps a new generation who know nothing of the violence and the division, can you give us a sense of how life changed in these islands after the Good Friday Agreement?
Well, I suppose if you looked at the 25 years, I mean, the daily routine never really changed over that 25, 30 years. There was bombings most days, there was shootings every day, there was killings most days. I think it was actually killing every day. And, there were terrible atrocities on all sides. You'd think you'd seen everything, and then something even worse happened. Somebody going into a bar and shooting everybody in the bar, regardless of who they were, what they were. Car bombs blowing places apart. One stick in my mind, blowing a butcher shop apart on a Saturday morning when people were in buying their, it was a fishmonger shop, I think, and all of these terrible atrocities. And the daily routine for a lot of people in Northern Ireland was you went outside in the morning, you checked under your car to see if there was any bombs or booby traps. That's what children saw their parents do, particularly if they were linked to any of the state areas. Life kind of changed at 6 o'clock, 6:30 in the evening. There was no nightlife. People went off the streets of all the towns and cities very early in the evening. And, every day the news was the same. Funerals, preachers of various religions making their remarks at the deaths of loved ones, bereaved families. So that was the order of the day for 30 years, Jamie. And effectively, other than the rare occasion now, that all ended. And people can go to school, go to college, go to work. Nightlife in Belfast is like London or Dublin. So it did really change. And of course, economically wise, people can work. There's more investment, there's more jobs. It's not perfect, but compared to where we were, it's a massive improvement.
The Good Friday Agreement was, in the words of one British government, a master of constructive ambiguity. I think Peter Ahern called it a masterpiece of constructive ambiguity and pragmatic generosity. I mean, as you say, the Good Friday Agreement didn't fix everything, did it? This was the start of a journey rather than the end.
Yeah, you know, I think, Jeremy, for an international audience, I think the peace bit worked really well, and with the exception of a few incidents which we wish they didn't occur, of course, naturally enough. The politics hasn't been as good. The institutions of the Good Friday Agreement, which are basically the assembly, like a parliament, the executive, like a government, they haven't been meeting. It's been stop-go. They find different reasons for it to collapse. I won't go into the complications of those for your audience, but you know, they by and large have nothing to do with what the agreement was. So, you know, it's a little bit annoying that sometimes people get aggrieved about something, and instead of just, as they would anywhere else in the world, you know, give their speeches and give the reasons why they're aggrieved, they pull down the whole institutions and they don't function. It's an extreme way of dealing with things, but you know, we have to get over that. It's taken our politicians time. My own view is that politicians are behind the people. The people seem to be always ahead. And what I suppose those who are in power, and I'm still kind of indirectly involved, but you know, those who have the task nowadays is to try and get these things back on track and get people to act normally and work together. It still is a divided society, Jamie. There still is Catholic Protestants. There still is Unionists, loyalists, nationalist Republicans. There's still segregated education. There's still some peace walls in Belfast. So I'd love to tell you it's perfect, but there's still plenty of work for the rising generation to deal with.
One of the mothers whose son was killed by the IRA told the UK's Guardian newspaper this week that the Good Friday Agreement brought peace but no justice. She said UK Prime Minister Tony Blair let Sinn Féin and the IRA off the hook. What was the price paid for peace injustice? There's been no truth and reconciliation process like there was in South Africa.
Yeah, well, there's been a number of attempts at that for the last 10, 15 years. The difficulty, I'm very familiar with the South African model because at the time I spent a lot of time with de Klerk and Mandela. Both of them came to Ireland and gave generously up their time. And the peace and reconciliation process in South Africa was that somebody would go before the peace and reconciliation and you would list out your crimes, and then effectively you got a total amnesty. Now, the people in Northern Ireland don't want that. They want a system where there's more, you know, judicial control. They're not trying to lock everybody up. That isn't what the relatives do. But they do not want this thing of, you know, just total amnesty and you can get away with it. So we haven't been able to find a model that has really satisfied people. And I have to say, there is legislation in front of Westminster at the moment. You know, I won't get into the ins and outs of it, but the only thing all the parties in Northern Ireland agree on, and they don't agree on much, Jamie, is that they disagree that this legislation is the appropriate way of dealing with it. So I think that legislation is probably dead in the water. If it's not, it should be. But on the other side of it, we haven't been able to find a process that deals with the legacy of the Troubles, and that we need to try and find a basis of doing that. It's not easy, but because there's about 30,000 active files, and I don't think any system can deal with that amount of files.
As we've been reporting, President Biden is about to fly in to join the 25th anniversary. Politics in Northern Ireland is pretty much at a stalemate at the moment. The devolved assembly is not sitting. Some hope that President Biden will push the reluctant parties back into government and normal devolved politics might restart. Is that realistic or even desirable? I mean, Biden is Irish and he's made his Irish lineage very clear. Clinton, of course, didn't have that burden of history. How difficult is this going to be?
Well, I think my deep regret, Jamie, is that President Biden isn't addressing Stormont today. That would have been a wonderful occasion. And in fairness to Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, he did everything he could since Christmas to try and make that happen. And the Irish government did so as well. Our Taoiseach Leo Varadkar and Micheál Martin. Didn't prove possible. One party wouldn't agree, a Democratic Unionist Party. So Joe Biden is now making his main speech at a wonderful new university building opening, and I'm sure he'll meet the party leaders there. But I don't feel, to answer your question directly, Jamie, I don't think anything he says will bring the institutions back, in the next month anyway. But hopefully we might make progress towards the end of May or into June. But I'd underline the word hope.